Welcome to the Doubles Only Tennis Podcast, where you learn the best doubles strategies to improve your game and win more matches. I'm your host, Will Bocek. This podcast, my website, and my weekly newsletter all focus on the goal of better understanding the sport of doubles and helping players like you improve faster through actionable advice that you can use in your very next match. My goal is to provide the best doubles strategy resources in the world. And to do that, I study, analyze, and work with players at every level of the game, all the way up to the ATP and WTA tours. If you enjoy this podcast, I've created doubles strategy products that go even deeper if you want to take your doubles knowledge to the next level. At the end of this episode, I'll explain more about them, or if you want to learn more now, go to thetennistribe.com/products. Here's today's episode. Hello everyone and Happy New Year. Today you're going to hear the second most downloaded episode from 2024. But before we get to that, a quick announcement on the webinar this month. So the January member-only webinar is going to be on Tuesday, January 28th. We're doing it a bit later in the month because I will be in Australia for the 2 weeks prior at the Australian Open. So I want to make sure that I'm back home, I have a good internet connection, and have time to put together all of the content for the webinar. This month, we're going to cover regular formation. So the regular serve formation is the most common formation that you'll see in club level doubles. So I want to make sure you understand all of the tactics that you can use out of regular formation, how to work together with your partner as a team to hold serve more often, what you should be looking for in the deuce court versus the ad court, first serve versus second serve, and a lot more. So we're going to really take a deep dive into the regular formation for the serve team on this webinar. If you're not a member and you do want to attend, you can check out the show notes where I've got a link to our membership page, and you can sign up there and learn more about that. The feedback so far on the webinars has been really, really good. Just that alone, I've been told, is worth the low cost of the membership. But you also get access to premium video content, exclusive discounts on different tennis gear, including gear from Tennis Warehouse and a lot more. And then also access to the ebooks and the courses that I've created over the years as well. So you get a lot of great doubles strategy with the membership. So check that out in the show notes. This episode is, again, an interview from 2024, the second most downloaded episode. It's with Tony Huber. He has coached multiple world number ones, which you'll hear about in a second. And I first met Tony this year, actually. It was in New York at the US Open, and it's one of the reasons that I try to go to so many of these pro-level tournaments. Obviously, I love watching the doubles, but even maybe arguably more than that, I love meeting people in the tennis industry, and I learn so much from these people. And Craig O'Shaughnessy introduced me to Tony. We chatted for a while, and then a few days later, we went and grabbed a dinner, and I just could tell he was a wealth of doubles knowledge, and I knew I had to have him on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll do another episode at some point in 2025 as well. He is obviously one of the best doubles coaches in the world, and now coaches club level players, which is really exciting. So this was a super popular episode. If you listen to it, I highly recommend you listen to it again. If you didn't listen, then this is absolutely must-listen content for doubles players. You're going to learn so much in this episode. So without further delay, enjoy the second most popular episode from 2024 with Tony Huber. Every now and then I meet someone or have a conversation with somebody that really changes the way I think about the game of doubles and improving on the tennis court in general. And in New York, I met Tony Huber and had actually a few of these conversations. And I wish I'd been able to record them, but I wasn't able to. So instead, I decided to have him on the podcast and talk about some of the things that we had discussed. So if you're an adult club level tennis player or even a pro tennis player, I feel like this conversation is going to help you a ton and change the way you see the doubles court. So Tony Huber is the former coach of world number one, Liezel Huber. He also coached other world number ones as well in doubles, multiple Grand Slam titles. And today he is the tennis director at Roosevelt Island Racket Club in New York, and he works with club level players. And I love being able to talk to people like this who have worked with players at every single level of the game, because they really understand the differences between the pro and the club level player, as well as the similarities. And we talk a lot about that during this conversation. But there's a lot of misconceptions about how doubles points and doubles matches are won. And Tony does a really, really good job of articulating what those misconceptions are, and then how to get the right mindset so that we understand what actually leads to winning doubles points. So in this conversation, he shares his story. We go over a bunch of different drills that he does with his club level teams to help them buy into some of these ideas on tennis is a game of errors, or the first four shots are most important, different things like that. We also go over a theory called the third string theory that will help you with your angles on your volleys. We talk about improving from 3035 to 4045, what the difference is between a performer and then a tennis player, and why you need both to improve your tennis game. We talk a lot about depth and why that's important, but why you can't focus on it too much because it can create too many errors in your game. Tony has a very mathematical approach, but it's also a very kind of human approach as well. He takes all the data that a lot of others that I've mentioned in the past, like Craig O'Shaughnessy, and data that I've gotten from tennis analytics, and he applies it on the court in the form of drills and different games, and he articulates that really well in this conversation. So I'm hoping to have Tony on again in the future, and we'll dive deeper into specific topics, but this is going to really change the way you see the court and give you very specific things to work on so that you can continue to improve your game. So I'm really excited to get your feedback on this conversation as well. I know y'all are going to learn a lot, and I love hearing from you. So definitely reach back out to me if you have any follow-up questions for me or Tony. Maybe we'll do a round two and answer some of those questions, because I feel like we just scratched the tip of the iceberg with this conversation as far as tennis knowledge that Tony has. So without further delay, enjoy this interview with Tony Huber. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today we have Tony Huber on. Tony, welcome.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
So you and I met a week or two ago in New York at the US Open. Our friend Craig O'Shaughnessy introduced us, and we just started chatting about doubles. You obviously have coached multiple former number ones in the world, and then also work with a lot of club level players. So as we started chatting, I was immediately like, I've got to have this guy on my podcast because my audience would absolutely love this material. And one of my favorite things about our conversation was how kind of fundamental and like from first principles that you understand the game of tennis and the game of doubles and are able to articulate it and teach it. So I wanted to start with the most basic question I could think of that we went over a little bit. But when we were talking, how are doubles matches won?
Oh, it's easy. You're not trying to win. You're trying to get the other team to lose. That's the fundamental principle. It all starts with what you believe the foundation is. For me, the foundation isn't learning a forehand, learning a backhand. It's just understanding what the game is you're playing. So for instance, if I went to Fort Worth to go visit you, and you're with your friends and you're playing a card game, let's say, and you ask me, hey, Tony, do you want to join in? I'll go, yeah, it looks like a lot of fun, but I've never seen this game before. You're going to have to give me at that point at least two pieces of information for me to join. I need to know what the rules are and then what's the objective is. Now, at some point, you might actually tell me how to hold the cards correctly. Maybe it's a game where I'm supposed to like not let people see my cards and I'm holding them backwards. But that's not going to be the first thing you teach me. The first thing you're going to teach me is like, what's the order that everyone does? What are we trying to do? We're trying to collect a certain suit of cards or something like that. And now at least I can play at an entry level. And that's how I look at tennis, because tennis is a game. So I need to look at, what is the game we're playing? So obviously the objective is you have to win the point. But the question is, well, how do points end? And points typically don't end in a winner. It ends with someone making a mistake. So instead of trying to now build my game and all my strokes and all my strategies about setting things up to hit a winning shot, it's more about, well, how can I get people to miss? Then that leads into the next question. Well, how do people miss? Well, you can miss in the net, you can miss long, you can miss wide. The question is are they all equal, or does one happen more than the other? And I'll tell you, at least from the data I've collected, that the net is the most overwhelming error that people make. So not only what I tell the players I'm coaching, like, not only are we trying to get them to miss, we can't miss in the meantime before they do. So we got to make sure we get everything over the net, put the pressure on them, and then see what happens with their shot. So that's kind of how I start with the base of the game, is just understanding what our game is. It's a game of errors more than it's a game of winners. And then it starts to lead into some other things, such as, like I just said, where is the error? It's in the net. When does this error occur in a rally? Does it happen after the 20th shot? No, we all know that most points will end, winner or error, within 4 hits of the point. But most of the time, that's going to be an error instead of a winner. And most of the time, that error is going to be in the net. And so that's how I get everyone to understand the game. And then now, based on what they're good at, what they're weak at, we can now kind of exploit that ideology a little bit. But I really, the precursor for me is that tennis needs to be what I guess I would just call, it's a game-centered approach. Like, you got to understand what the game is. Once you understand what the game is, then you can go into a player-centered approach with what someone's weakness is, what someone's strengths are, and stuff like that. But first, it's amazing how we teach so much stuff, and then we don't even teach them what the game is.
Mm-hmm. With the net errors specifically, this is something that I guess my question to start, so is that data you've collected based on singles, doubles, or both? Because I would imagine net errors in doubles can be a little bit more, I guess, understandable if you're trying to keep the ball low or keep the ball at a net player's feet, for example. How do you think about that, and what does the data tell us about that?
Yeah, it's tricky because it also will depend on how the team plays. So, for instance, I'm much older than you. So when I was your age and I was playing doubles, we were all taught both come in. And the number one reason why a coach would tell us to both come in is because they say, well, go look on TV what the best teams in the world do. And sure enough, you look back, there were 2 net rushers. Well, flip now. You went to the U.S. Open. Definitely on the women's side, you don't see that hardly at all. It's a lot of 1 up, 1 back. It's a lot of 2 back, and then you might come across a team that's 2 up. And on the men's side, it is actually getting more where it's a 1 up, 1 back scenario where a guy's ripping forehands. So the premise that you're always trying to keep it low because there's net players, yeah, I'm sure that does play into it. But believe it or not, you just get into these cross-court rallies, and then once again, the rally's got to end somehow. And it's still just going to end in an error. So what I find is that when it comes to, at least on the recreational side, and I'm talking from 4 or 5 down, it kind of trends just like singles does, because there's so much rallying from the baseline where there's not a lot of 2 up like instantly. So those errors still occur really quick. Because think about it, if it's happening within 4 shots, that's the serve, the return, and now it's like 2 ground strokes. Point's done somewhere. So there's sometimes not even a chance for that volleyer to even touch the ball, and the net
Right.
error occurred. Now, that being said, I want the net player to help cause that error. Like, I want them moving around, I want them faking, I want them going, I want them pinching the middle. That will then maybe cause some stress on the baseliner to hit it in the net.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk about the first four shots, but before I do, can you just share briefly your kind of tennis story with us? How did you get started in tennis, and then how did you end up coaching on the pro tour to where you are now?
Yeah, did end up coaching on tour. It was a little bit accidental. When I was very young in '93, I was lucky enough to get a job at the Vandermeer Tennis University in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Now, back in those days, the only academy probably larger than them in the US was Nick Bollettieri. So those were the two big academies at the time. So that's kind of where I got my start. But I got my start in adult tennis there. Then moved into like junior performance, but more of the 14 and unders. And then, I kind of moved around to the different academies that Vandermeer had throughout the country, and then took on a full-time job at a normal tennis club in Houston, Texas, where I'd work with kids and adults. And it just coincidentally, my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being married to for over 20 years, happened to become the number one doubles player in the world. So I worked with her for about 15 years. But in that 15 years, I got to work with a lot of other singles players, other doubles players. And it was probably just starting to travel with her first that, I kind of would meet some other players, get to help them out. And then the next thing you know, you're just out there, and uh, 15, 20 years goes by.
Yeah.
And that's it. Now, she retired. We moved from Houston to New York to work for a nonprofit. COVID kind of hit. My department got cut. However, the gentleman that started that nonprofit also owns some commercial clubs. So here I am still in New York at Roosevelt Island Racket Club as the adult tennis director.
hmm So you're working with mostly adult players now, just like
Correct.
USTA club level players?
Yeah, I work everything from the 1.0s. We have a huge like beginner program that does a 1.0, 1.5, 2.0. Once you're in the 2.5, that you've now hit low intermediate for us. So then we do 2.5, 3.0 clinics, 3.0, 3.5, 3.5, 4.0, 4.0, 4.5. I have a couple USTA teams that I work with. But mainly my priority here is working with the adults,
hmm
which has been a treat because I've never really been known as the adult guy. I've always been known as either a performance player coach or the performance juniors. So it was really interesting jumping into this field, but looking at data, it's all the same anyway. It's the same principles, points end the same way. So in that aspect, that lets me know it's not so much about someone's level; it's just something inherent in the game itself.
hmm Yeah, this is so that's something I run into a lot. I'll post a lesson on Instagram or YouTube, and it's a video of a pro point, and I'm talking about maybe how to pinch towards the middle instead of covering the alley when your partner's serving. And inevitably, with all of these videos, somebody eventually comments and says, well, that works at the pro level because their serves are so good. But at the club level, my partner has a weak second serve. So that down the line shot is so easy. How would you think about responding to somebody like that?
Yeah, so in all of my classes, I have a camera and it
hmm
collects data. The one I use is baseline vision. And what we do is go, okay, maybe that might be true. Let's find out. And we'll go over, it usually takes maybe 4 or 5 lessons to kind of see what a pattern is. Uh,
hmm
so something as simple as, oh, that second serve will be taken down the line all the time. Well, the reality is that's not true. They may hit it hard, but they don't hit it hard down the line. They actually hit it hard cross court. Down the line returns is very rare. Even when you bring it up that it could be a good option, they don't do it all that often. I have like a rule on where I put the net player. I basically put them in the center of the box. And then I tell them, like, if they don't go up your line, take one more step to the inside of the court. Like get closer to find out how far you can go into the middle of the court before they go up your line. And when they do that, say, nice shot. And now you own them, because now you can do like a little fake if you want, because now you know they're reacting to your court position. So the reality is, just like I would with a doubles team, I would prefer them still for the returner to try to hit down the line versus the cross court, because at the end of the day, it's still a more low percentage shot.
Yeah.
So, and then we do a thing called rule of three, which is, okay, if that person has beaten you into the alley 3 times, go guard it. Sure. But until the rule of three, we keep doing what we're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like to add to that, it might even be like a rule of 3 without missing, right? Like if I get beat like 3 times in a set, that might be a good thing, because I might have also forced like 7 errors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they made 3 out of 10, you know?
Yeah, I always tell when you get beat down the line with that, I always say, remind them to say really good shot, like compliment them, because you want them to keep trying to do it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So something I was reminded of when we were chatting a few weeks ago was the importance of the first 4 shots. And I actually wrote about it in my newsletter that went out yesterday. And we were talking about, or you were telling me how you teach the importance of the first 4 shots and rally length to some of your adult teams. And you talked about a drill, or not a drill, like you have them play games and you grab a ball and put it in different hoppers. Can you describe that for the audience?
Yeah. So one thing I do through the games that we do is I got to get them to buy into what I'm saying. Like I can sit here and say something's, 70%, 20%, 10%, 0 through 4, 5 through 8, but I got to prove it to them. And I can't just flash up, something on the internet. Like I want them to see their numbers. So basically what we'll do a simple game where it'll be a doubles game. 2 players at one baseline, 2 players at the other baseline. I feed the ball in. As soon as I feed it in, anything goes. You can run in, stay back, but that's how we're going to start the point. And usually and we'll play to something like 15 or 21. The first thing I will do is I'll just take a look at how the point ended, and I'll make 2 hoppers. Every time I see a point end with a winner, I'll drop a ball in one hopper. Every time I see a ball end in an error, I'll drop it in a different hopper. And then at the end, I'll just bring the 2 hoppers up, and then I'll ask them, which hopper do you think is which? Which one's the winners? Which one is the errors? And typically, and sometimes I'll even just throw out a number first. They don't even know what we're doing. I'll just yell out something like, hey, can anyone remember the number 70-30? And then they don't even know what I'm talking about, but I'll get someone to memorize that number. And at the end, I'll show the hoppers, and I'll be like, that 70-30 was, I predicted 70% of the points would end in errors, the other 30% winners. Then I hold up the 2 hoppers, and sure enough, that's what the ratio looks like. So that's the first buy-in, that, points do end in error. Then we'll switch it around. We'll do another round. Now I have 3 hoppers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, when there is an error, I'm going to put it in a corresponding hopper. Is it in the net? Was it long, or was it wide? Once again, the ratio is this. Long is usually at least double what wide is. And in the net will be either half of those, the same as those 2 combined, or more. So that's always the ratio. And we'll play, and then I'll have like one basket with like 2 or 3 balls in it. I'll have another basket with maybe 10, and then I'll have another one with like 18 balls in it. And I'll be, okay, which one was wide? Now, everyone kind of gets that one, because they'll recall, it didn't seem like much was wide. I go, yeah, that was the hopper where three points ended with a wide shot. Now, which one was long? And in the beginning, with all the new people I have, they always pick the larger basket. The one that had like 17 or 18 in it. And I go, no, it was actually this one with 10. This big one over here, that was the net. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden you see their eyes like light up, like, oh my goodness, it didn't even feel that way. And I go, yeah, that's the problem when you trust your feelings. So still at the end of the day, it was in the net. And I go, but here's the deal, that's normal. And then I have like thousands and thousands and thousands of points of data for the different levels. And I go, look, it falls right in with what I've collected for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, so I'm like, now the third round is this. Now I make the 0 through 4 hopper, 5 through 8, and 9+. And remember, this is not even without serving and returning. I just feed it in. So you would think right away points would get a little longer because there's no serving or returning involved.
Mm-hmm.
What's Craig's number? 70, 20, 10. Guess what those 3 hoppers look like? 70, 20, 10, like that. It's amazing. And then that right there, those 3 pieces of data. How does a point end? Where does it end? When does it end? That is my foundation for how to teach the game.
Mm.
And I just
So
show them that this is their data. It's not something I pulled up. They're absolute. Now I get the buy-in.
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So the last one was 3 hoppers. Just to clarify for people who aren't familiar with the rally length, so it's 0 to 4 shots is the first hopper. That's 70% of the points.
Mm-hmm.
5 to 8 shots is the second hopper. That is 20% of the points, and then 10% is the long rallies that are 9+. Those are the ones you see on TV. Those are the highlight reels. Those are the points we remember, but it's not the reality of our sport.
And that's also the point where one side is cheering, yeah, and the other side's like, oh, such a heartbreaker. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
we played a game to 21. The score was 21-19. You're panicking about the 2 balls in that bucket. That is not, it's like, who did well in the 0 through 4? That's the big bucket. That's where we want to get good. And so at the end, like people, I make a joke. I go, look, I'm not being some type of fuzzbuster type of coach out here that says you can never miss or miss in the net. Please just don't do it within the first 2. Put your first 2 balls over the net, no matter what it takes, then go crazy and wild with the point. You will be amazed at how many points you win before you even start doing your crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the drills we can do, or that you do with your club level players to work on these first 4 shots, minimize these errors, especially in the net? Do you have some favorite like games or drills?
Yeah, they're super boring. Like when I worked with Liezel, who she was the second world longest #1 in doubles in women's history, only behind Martina Navratilova. And everyone wanted to see the drills we did. Oh, they must be amazing. I do the absolute most boring exercises ever. Matter of fact, I call it's the excellence of mundanity. They're the most simplest things. So I will do our practices 2 ways. I will start with basket feeding, 2 across the other way, side to side. Approach shot, 2 volleys, approach shot, 2 volleys with an overhead. And I'll collect the data on that. The one thing we will notice is whenever I'm doing baseline drills for a basket, players will probably put anywhere between 70 to 80% of the balls in play. Soon as I do approach and volleys and overheads, all of a sudden they get to about 85, maybe even a little bit higher percentage in play. And that's kind of bizarre because I'll even poll the group that I'm working with and I'll ask them, where are you more comfortable playing? And they'll say the baseline. And I go, yeah, you look more comfortable at the baseline. But the reality is you actually make more shots when you come to the net. So that is one way I advocate at least one player getting to the net is by letting them know you make more balls the closer you get to the net, even if you're not as comfortable there. So I'll do some simple stuff like that. I'll do the game, like I said, where I start the 2 at the baseline, 2 back, I feed it in. Sometimes I'll do a variant on it, like whoever I'm feeding the ball to at the baseline, the non-hitter has to run in so that they're learning how to use their time when the ball's not being sent to them. But basically, I pick really easy, simple exercises. But I do that by design because I can talk about a zillion different things and still do that exercise. I might want to work on technique. So I might just do 2 across and making sure everyone is rotating their hips on their forehand. We might work on finding out, is it important to hit deep? let's do 2 across. Every ball, I want you to aim 7 feet or closer to the baseline. So I put some cones out there, and we'll look for that and see if that is worth doing. So I really don't have a zillion exercise. Now, probably the best one I do is, and this actually I think makes the most sense, start a practice with serving. That's shot 1. Add a returner. Serve, hit the return, you're done. Serve, hit the return, you're done. Okay, here's our third exercise. Serve, hit the return, server, hit the next shot. Step 4, serve, return, server next shot, returner next shot, we're done. Let's rotate. Like, I will do the most simplest things like that because that's actually what happens in a point. Most of the time. You got to get through that. So I don't have a lot of crazy cool design drills, because unless I don't think I can teach through it like really quickly, or I don't feel it transfers right away to a match, I just find it something where it looks cool, but I'll tell them, yeah, but this isn't going to transfer.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. If you want to be like efficient with your practice and you want your practice to translate to winning matches, then you just replicate what leads to winning matches over and over and over. And it should be mundane. But I feel like a lot of people are always looking for like this new tactic or this new secret or there's new like drill or training tool or whatever. But in reality, it just comes down to kind of these principles.
I mean, listen, you've went to the practice courts. What do? These are the best players in the world. They hit the ball up the middle. They hit the ball cross court. They hit the ball cross court the other way. Someone's at the baseline. Someone's at the net. They do some serves. They do some returns. And now if you look at the doubles teams, they do that super fast. And then the rest of the practice is playing points.
Yeah, and they spend so much time on serves and returns too. That's one big difference.
I remember Max Mirny flipping out at his coach. The drill looked really cool, but he's like, "This will never happen in a match. We're not doing it."
Yeah. You talked about captaining or working with USTA teams. What advice would you have for captains listening if they have USTA teams, in terms of, practices they put together, lineups, any advice or anything you've seen work really well for USTA teams?
Yeah, so basically what I do now is I try to stay out of me making the lineup. I always put that pressure on the captain, but I will tell the captain this. I go, there's a couple ways you can form your teams. One is put people together that have contrasting styles. You got to be careful. Like if you have 2 really good net players, that can sometimes just become a 50-50 match. Either they win the match really well because just what they're doing, the other side can't handle it. However, it can get flipped that it just doesn't work and they don't have like a plan B because they just like to come to the net. So I always try to tell like our captains, like if you have someone who's maybe a little bit better at singles, better at the baseline, and someone else who's like maybe a little more crafty at the net, that's a good combo. A tall, short player is a good combo. Someone fast, maybe someone slow is a good combo because they can kind of make up for some deficiencies here and there. Also, it makes, if there's 2 net players, me and my partner just have to figure out how to beat a net player, and now we can beat both of them. But when you're dealing with a net player and a baseliner, we got to come up with 2 strategies at least. How are we going to beat the net player? Plus, how are we going to beat the baseliner? So that's usually like what I try to get our captains to do is, find a steady ground stroker and someone comfortable at the net and make that the team. And another one is, I've always played myself on a league team with someone that if I lost, I knew I was still going to have a good time with. Because at the end of the day, I play league, even though it's competitive. I play league because I want to have some fun.
Yeah.
And I don't even enjoy winning if I don't enjoy the person I'm playing with. I've had a better time losing with some people, but man, we had a lot of fun doing it. So that also can be another approach because not every league team is necessarily trying to get to nationals.
Yeah.
Some are just, they want to put a team together and they want to have fun. Well, that's the case. You got to put people together who kind of like each other.
Yeah, that's something I've told captains in the past too, to like basically to decide on your goal at the beginning of the season and let the team know, right? Because a lot of captains get into trouble late in the season when they're trying to only play their best lineup, and maybe the players on the team don't necessarily agree with it, or they hadn't played as many matches as this other person. But if you make all that very clear up front and say, look, I'm gonna do everything we can to get to nationals, or on the flip side, we're going to have fun and I'm going to play everybody equally, then nobody's as surprised at the end of the day. But I like that advice on contrasting styles, because you even see that at the pro level, right? Like there's certain teams who have the same style who end up pairing together, and they'll win two matches in a row, 2-2, and then they'll lose like 2-3 in the next match, because it's like
Yeah.
based on the matchup, they don't have a plan B, like you said.
Hmm.
One other question I had for you about club level is so let's say, and I feel like you've answered some of this already, but I want to ask this anyways. Let's say you had 3 months to turn a 3-0 or 3-5 player into like a 4-0 to 4-5 player. How do you think about, or what would you do in those first 3 months? How would you kind of build out a game plan for them?
So first, once I think you're in the 4045, we have this term. We tend to use it towards juniors, but really, you can use it with adults as well. It's like a performance player. I work with performance juniors, or you hear something like that, and it's like, okay, I get that. Now define what that is.
Hmm.
So my definition is it's a performer who plays tennis. That's a performance tennis player. So we're going to define what a performer is and what a tennis side is. The performer is everything that is physical and everything that is psychological. So I can go to like an Equinox gym here and go watch someone train, and I'll be like, man, I don't know what sport that person plays, but I can tell they're good at it just by how they're training, because you can see this intensity, this passion, this focus, and they're super athletic. Maybe they're extra strong, or they have some agility or balance, or I see them drinking like a protein shake, because
Yeah.
nutrition, you can just tell. I don't know what it is you do, but I'm sure you're good at it.
Yeah.
Then you have then what is sports specific, and in all the game sports, it comes down to tactics and technique. So I guess the question is, if you're trying to get someone who's a 3035 to a 4045, that means they have to outperform everyone in their group. So I will tackle the performance side first,
Hmm.
because I don't want to have someone who, like, it's like I want to teach people tennis. I want to teach performers tennis. I don't want to teach tennis to just people, because I'll teach them all the tactics and the technique. And then when it's time to perform, it falls apart. So
Hmm.
I have to do a lot of in a scenario like that. We would have to look at the athletic side of them and figure out some assessments with them. Um, Make sure that they understand what the process is going to be, and are they going to buy into it, and are they going to listen, give feedback, and then we start a training regimen that, no matter, even if we're talking about tactics or technique, it always incorporates that performer side. So for instance, almost all practices start with mini tennis,
Hmm.
and for most people, mini tennis is okay. We got to kill 5 to 10 minutes before the real practice starts. Performers don't do that. I worked with a player, Sugiyama from Japan. We always started with mini tennis. Within the first 6 minutes of mini tennis, I'm cramping because she's so intense in that. She would make every single shot. Every shot, even though we're in mini tennis, would rise on me. And it's like, you know what? Like, you have to be a real good performer from ball one to sustain that in mini tennis. So even in mini tennis, I find all these objectives, and it's not so much because I need them to learn this technique when we're doing the mini tennis, but what it does is it puts their mind in a certain frame to help with the rest of the practice. So no matter what we would be doing, I'm always thinking of the performer. Let's make them a performer. Now we'll work on the tactics and technique to help get them through whatever levels or whatever challenges they need to get through to get to the next level. So I know that wasn't really specific, but that's kind of my framework. So we do a lot of things, like even in mini tennis with my teams, like what percentage of time should a player be split stepping when they're doing mini tennis? Well, I would think it would be close to 100%.
Yeah.
So I'll ask, okay, what percentage did you do? Some of them say, I didn't split step once. I split step half the time. So I don't need to teach them the technique of how to split step. They know how to do it. It just wasn't in their mindset to do it. So I'm like, okay, we're going to do mini tennis again for 3 more minutes. Let's see if we can let's make a deal. Split step 75% of the time. Now, the next time they come to practice, they're already at 75% because they remember it. Now they're at 80. And eventually now everyone split steps almost 100% of the time, just in the mini tennis. So that wasn't a technique or a tactic. That was more where I'm tackling the mental side of them. And if they're going to split step from ball one in mini tennis, I don't usually have too many issues with them once we're doing drills and games that they forget the split step.
That makes sense. But what about, so when you're talking about training the performer, you gave some good examples of on court. Are you looking at off court stuff too? Like trying to, I mean, for adult club players, it might be tough to get them to like go to the gym or whatever if they're not already doing, I don't know.
It is tough. So the cool thing is I have measurements for different players at different ages. So for instance, we all know that at some point you need to do a side shuffle. So someone may say, oh yeah, I do side shuffles. And I go, yeah, in the space you covered with 3 side shuffles, I can do it in 2. And I'm older than you. I'm shorter than you. And I eat queso and chips for dinner. So I'm not like some athletic specimen over here. So I'll go, can you get that same distance, but instead of 3 side shuffles, can you show me you can do it in 2? Now, sure enough, they do it in 2. Now, I didn't change their technique. All I did was change their mindset. They got a little bit more athletic with it, and they did it in 2. So it can be stuff as simple as that. So I don't need them to all of a sudden go hardcore in the gym, but I do need to let them know that at different levels, players do things at different speeds and different distances. So, for instance, side shuffles and crossover steps and things like that. Kids, if you're talking about kids at different ages, they can get different distances with those. So it'd be helpful to know, hey, what does a nationally ranked 14-year-old, what distance do they gain in one crossover? You know, and know that measurement. And so you can then compare what your kids are doing or the adult is doing and see if we can get that same type of distance or get close to it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That makes sense. What is the third string rule? And I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I remember us talking about it.
String 3 theory.
String 3 theory. That's what it is. Describe string 3 theory.
So this is always a tip that I use in 2 ways. One is, and I don't even know why it works in this first one I'm telling you. And if you have someone who's kind of sometimes lost their rhythm or mishitting a lot, I will just feed them some balls. And if you're looking at your tennis racket and you have the main strings and the cross strings, I'll say, show me where the third cross string is from the top. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to feed you a ball and I want you to try to hit it right on the third string. And all of a sudden, it tends to square up their racket head magically, and they start to hit the ball cleaner. I don't know. Maybe if I pick string 5, it would still work. I just use 3. But the main reason I use it is when it comes to hitting balls in different directions. So, for instance, the 3 directions, you can hit a ball, you can hit it straight, cross court, or inside out. And it's the relationship between your hand and that third string from the top that dictates which direction that ball goes in. So for instance, when you strike a ball and your hand and string 3, I don't know if you can see this, but if they're pretty even with each other, that ball's going straight. If string 3 gets ahead of the hand, it's going to go cross court. And if you get your hand ahead of string 3 at impact, it's going to go inside out. Mm-hmm. So now there's more than one way to make those happen. You can reach further out in front. You can reorient your body. So there's a few different ways. Like I can get string 3 in front of my hand at impact. And some of it might have to do with how the ball is coming at me. Because one easy way is just make contact further out in front. But sometimes that incoming ball doesn't allow for you to reach that far out in front to get it to cross court. But if you can make impact closer to your body, it's really easy to get string 3 out in front. So in doubles, that's always important because the cross court is a huge, important shot. So I will always talk about, no matter what is sent at you, this is how we're going to get string 3 ahead of your hand, and we'll get that ball cross court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that rule a lot. I'm going to start using that. I haven't been on the court coaching since we talked about it, but I'm definitely going to start using that one. And it's how you see a lot of the pro players, and it's something I worked on in the doubles camp up in New York, is those angle volleys. There's so many club players who practice their volleys hitting back to the baseline player over and over, and then they get out in the match and they can't figure out why they can't put away the volley, so then they think they stink at the net. But if they can do this string 3 rule or string 3 theory, then they'll be able to hit some of these angles a little bit better. And obviously practicing that on a consistent basis will help. Another question I had that was a topic we discussed a bit is depth. So how do we work on depth and talk about the importance of depth in doubles?
Yeah, the first one, you got to define it. And I'm not here to say what the definition is. It's just, you got to be clear with who you're working with, how you're going to define what depth is. So, for instance, a lot of people will just say depth is anything past the service line. Well, if that's your definition, that's your definition. Some people will say any ball that bounces closer to the baseline than the service line is deep. Okay, that's great. The camera I use puts it 7 feet or closer to the baseline as depth. And then it will take from the service line to that 7-foot marker as medium, and then everything before the service line is short. So I'm currently just using those definitions because that's what my camera is providing. If I had a camera that I could manipulate it maybe a little bit different and make it forward lengths, I would do that. So right now I just deal with it that way. We all know that depth is important. And if anyone has listened to Craig's 8 ways to get someone to miss, it is the diamond. It's the number one way to get someone to miss. But my data is showing you got to be careful you're not a diamond hunter. If we're really talking about the 0 through 4, that means we've got to get 4 shots miss on ball 5. 4 out of 5 is 80%. So in my practices, our goal at the end of the day, no matter what it is we're working, we want to leave knowing that our shots in play were between 80 and 85%. So we work with that number to start with. Now, I will do drills where I will set up a line of cones that are 7 feet from the baseline. I'll do all my drills that I normally do, and I'll ask the players 100% of the time, you need to try to get the ball into that deep zone, and let's see what you do. And sure enough, when a basket is done, they're at about anywhere between 12 to 17% of all the balls they hit landed there. And I go, okay, is that good? And then I look up pro players. I go, well, how often do they hit balls there? And it's about 15 to 20% of the time. Pro players get their ball within the last 7 feet. So I go, oh, that's awesome. You guys are just like the pros. You're putting the same percentage in. But here's our problem. You guys only put 73% of your balls in play. So in your hunt to find that, you totally lost your consistency. So then I started thinking, I called up one of my old friends, Louis Cap at Vandermeer. He's a rocket scientist. Guy's smart as a tack. He said, Tony, make the target medium and do the same exercise. So I made the medium zone target. We went through everything the same. And then I looked at the data and I go, wow, this is amazing. Guys, you kept your ball in 84% of the time. That's awesome. And here's the cool thing. You were still 15% of your balls deep because you
Wow.
missed the medium target.
Wow.
So what I do is say, look, I love it when your ball is deep. I love it. I just don't want you trying to do it. Just aim medium. Your skill will allow for you to mess up and still go too far with the shot. And you're still going to end up with the exact same numbers of balls in the deep zone, but your overall percentage in play is higher.
That's an amazing story.
And
What skill?
I wouldn't have known that without this camera, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to get one of these cameras. What skill level was this that you did this with?
I did this with the 3035, the 3540, and the 4045. It all
Okay.
comes out the same. It's
Yeah.
just at the speed of which it happens and the height over the net. So the depth, as we kind of go lower down the rating, they can still do it, but they got to go higher over the net.
Okay.
And then
I
as
see.
I kind of climb up, because I have a net clearance like average, and when I get to the higher levels, they're doing the same thing, but with just the ball going lower over the net.
Because they can just generate more pace, I
They
guess.
can, yeah, because the three defining things that make a ball go a distance would be the amount of spin, the amount of speed, and then the trajectory itself.
Sure.
So because they
Okay.
have a little bit more speed, they don't need as much of the arcing trajectory or the severity of it.
I'd be curious to see this drill done with pro players if they're also like if they have the same percentages aiming mid-court versus deep. Um, I would guess that they'd be better at the deep drill, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it would translate the
Well,
same.
yeah, the hard part is like you can go back and you can chart a match and see which zones they landed in. The problem is you just
Sure.
don't know the intention.
Right, exactly.
That's the problem. So, but yeah, I'm sure you could do this in a practice. Say, okay, here's the zone. You two guys keep trying to hit into the zone, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to keep track of what's landing in the net, what's landing wide, what's landing long. And remember, still at the end, it it, it defeats the purpose of going into that deep zone if we're only going to be 70% of our balls in play.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said it is a diamond, but just be careful. You're not a diamond hunter. There's other gems out there that you can use.
When you were doing this drill, last question on this, were they hitting back and forth or were you feeding and then they were trying to hit to the depth?
I've done it both ways. I've done it with
Okay.
feeding, and then this particular camera has a game on it. It's called like the deep zone game or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
you just feed it in and you rally with someone, and it gives you different points and for where your ball is landing depth wise. And then the game is over, and there'll be a winner and someone who loses, but then it will also tell you where your percentages were in those zones.
Right.
And and then what was in play, what wasn't in play. And it's very rare that I get anyone close to 20% of their shots that they've hit landing in that deep zone, even when that is the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would guess the reason I asked that is because I would guess if you're like rallying with someone and you're both going for depth, that's going to be pretty hard and the errors are going to increase. But if you're feeding balls that consistently say land on the service line and they're going for depth, I would think that the player would be a little more accurate since they're hitting off a ball that lands a little bit
It
shorter.
is that they're about 15% accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where they are when I do the feeding. Um, Now, what I will say is if you do want to go deep, I will tell them hit the back end of the medium depth. Like
Hmm.
aim for it. Like there'll be the lines. I'll be like, aim for this line right here. Like that's right where you want to put it. So that
Right.
way, if you're a foot off, now you're in that zone easy. I just
Sure.
tell them don't aim for that zone.
Yeah, don't aim for the middle of the zone because that's too
And
too
and then
deep.
when you
Yeah.
come to the net, like you said, what does everyone want to do with their volleys?
Hit
Put
it
it
back
back
to
to
the
that player in
baseline
that
player.
zone. And what you were even explaining is no, hit the volley off the court. Well, that's going to be in the short and the medium zone.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I use that medium zone a lot, but I'll use the different depth in the medium zone. Um, like volleys, I want you going for the the deepest area of the short zone or the shortest area of the medium zone. That's where I kind of want that volley to get knocked off the court.
Mm-hmm. The deepest area of the medium zone. Say that again.
The deepest area of the short zone.
Yeah. Okay.
Or the shortest area of the medium zone. Like, don't put this thing deep.
Right. Yeah, I think the exception I generally tell people is on like defensive volleys. Like if somebody ripped at you, or if it's like below the height of the net and it's not a ball you can angle off, I'm okay usually with people going deep on that just to reset the point and force the opponent to come up with something good, right? But the balls that are above the height of the net, more neutral to offensive volleys, if you can practice angling those off, those are going to be the ones
then
to
you're
finish.
dealing with some very skilled people, because if I'm under the level of the net and you're asking me to hit the last 7 feet of the court,
well,
I don't know how
maybe I
I'm
mean the
performing
back
that.
part of the medium zone. How about
Okay,
that?
that's what I mean, because that
Yeah,
even if you then that's still deep. We're talking you're still
sure. Yeah.
8 to 9 feet from the baseline.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
exactly.
problem is when you tell people deep, they're thinking the last 2 or 3 inches.
Okay. Yeah,
Like
I need to
say,
clarify that more, I guess.
yeah, because I'll ask a player, hey, where were you trying to hit it? Deep. I'm like, okay, where deep? And I'll tell them, and basically it's like 2 inches before the baseline. I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's pretty deep.
It's margin of error is not favorable.
So, like I
All
said,
right.
what I want to get back to is, you do have to define it. And I'm not saying my definition needs to be the definition, but once you define things, then it really does clarify, when you're trying to help a player on what to do, it really does make it more clear. Just not deep. Well, what is depth? What's medium? What's short? And you can chop that up any different way. And you can chop it up even more the more skillful the player is.
Yeah, super important. All right, Tony. So let's finish off with some rapid fire questions. I'm sure we'll do another podcast at some point because I really enjoy chatting with you, and I know this is going to be a really popular episode. I think people are going to enjoy this a lot, and we can dive deeper into maybe a specific topic next time, like serve strategy or return or whatever it is. So a couple of rapid fire questions to finish off here. What is your favorite tennis racket?
So I have the old one and my new one. So
Okay.
my old one is a Prince racket CTS approach. And probably I like that one the most because when I reflect when I was probably the best player, that just happened to be the racket I used.
Okay.
Now I'm old, and there's actually one of the guys that works at our club is an engineer, and he engineered this racket called a Bolt racket. And what I love about it is I teach and do so much feeding that normally I have the racket I hit with and then some giant version of the one I feed with because my arm just gets really tired. This particular racket it has some technology in it that it's the only racket where I can use the same frame and feed all day and play without my arm being hurt. It's actually designed for people with arm injuries, and it's called the Bolt. So right now, that's my favorite racket. I love it.
Okay.
Um,
Can
I don't
people
know.
buy it, or is it?
You're going to have to Google it. He might sell it out of the back of his car. I don't know, but
Okay.
I like the racket.
Okay. I'll
So
see if I can find
that's
it and
it.
link to something in the show notes if I do. What's your favorite tennis tournament?
So my favorite tennis tournament from a slam is the Happy Slam, Australia, and probably on a tour, I'm actually going to say Cincinnati because I'm like a middle America type guy at heart. And if you get bored of the tennis, right across the street, there's a Six Flags.
Awesome. It sounds fun. What's your favorite tennis book?
So my favorite tennis book is, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's the coach's name. The Wardlaw Directionals. Have you heard of those from Paul Wardlaw? So Paul
No.
Wardlaw came up with like a singles tactical decision making thing that you make tactical decisions based off. And
Okay.
and his book is called Pressure Tennis. And
Okay.
it
Yeah, I
doesn't
see it here.
matter. It does not matter what level I work with, even if I'm working with a pro player. The very first thing we go over is the Wardlaw directionals. Not that we're going to use it the whole time, but there's going to be some key instances where I want that player to follow that tactical guideline.
Okay. I'll have to check that one out. I have not read that one. Do you have a favorite non-tennis book?
Freakonomics. If anyone's familiar with any of those writers' books or their documentary, it really just makes you look at things through a different lens, and maybe you come up with a different conclusion or a different way to tackle the problem. And when people talk to me about tennis, they understand like how I'm explaining it, but they've never thought to view it the way I'm viewing it. And I probably take a lot of credit from just reading those books and their documentary of just how to look at something and just, okay, we're going to look at it through a different lens though, and come up with a completely different conclusion.
Yeah, I love books like that. That's definitely a good one. I've read it before. And anything that kind of gets you to think a different way, I feel like is kind of the point of a lot of books I read anyways. So last question, how can we make pro doubles more popular?
If I knew that answer, I wouldn't be the adult director at Roosevelt Island Racket Club. It is such a tough task, from a tournament, like the amount of money that they spend on it, what they've tried. I mean, I was at a tournament in Berlin and they were giving out free ice cream if you would stay for the doubles match, and everyone would leave. So I'm going to just be brutally honest. For all of the people that wish there was more doubles on TV or doubles got highlighted more, this is how it's going to start. You have to go to a tournament, and literally when there's a doubles match, don't go get a drink, sit your butt in the stands. Because TV is not going to decide to view something until they see it, the crowd full of people. Once they see, oh my goodness, look at all these people watching this. This must be something good that more people want to watch. Then maybe it will get televised a little bit more. So part of it is all the people that I see that wish that doubles had more exposure, when they have an opportunity to sit and watch it, they don't. So I'm going to put some of that back on the spectators that really want to see it go more. The other one will actually be from the player side. And I will tell you this, no one has worked harder on giving themselves exposure in doubles than Mike and Bob Bryan. They took it upon themselves. They didn't wait for the ATP tour or anything like that. They did the work. So I think if the players want that exposure, right now, they've got to step out of their comfort zone and do things that help bring light to their game. And I'm telling you, I think if those two things could happen, tennis will, at least from a viewer spectatorship, will be, much more popular. Because when you go to a slam and you even watch some of those early round doubles matches, those courts are pretty full.
Yeah, they are.
And it's an exciting atmosphere. The problem isn't so much the slam. It's now when you go to a regular tour event. What is that like when you're at an ATP 250 or a WTA 500 or something that's not one of the big ones. When you watch doubles, it's just not well attended, but the people are there because they were watching the singles.
Yeah, good answers. Awesome, Tony. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks a ton for coming on. Any final requests or comments for the audience before we hop off here?
No, I just, if you do have some questions or anything like that, have them send them your way. I'd love to answer them, or, maybe there's a question that someone has. I go, oh, wow, yeah, that's let me find out. Let me do some investigating on it, and let's see.
Yeah, definitely email me, will@thetennistribe.com if y'all have any questions. And maybe we'll if we get enough questions, we can just do another podcast and answer those then. So thanks again, Tony. I appreciate the time, and thanks everyone for listening. I will link to everything in the show notes, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Doubles Only podcast. If you're interested in diving deeper into any topics I discuss, I've created doubles strategy products that allow me to bring you more podcasts and other doubles content without relying on paid ads. I have ebooks and courses that help you make better strategic decisions during matches and become the smartest player on the court. Go to thetennistribe.com/products to learn more. You can also join my free weekly doubles strategy newsletter that includes video lessons and more on our homepage. If you want to connect, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or email me directly, will@thetennistribe.com.